Hello and welcome to topic 2 of this mini course online in nonprofit marketing. The course is a part of Erasmus Plus project, nonprofit all-inclusive, and is co-funded by European Union. My name is Irina and I am one of the project managers for this project, and I'm also a founder of Association Nonprofit Marketing in Sweden, or Ideell Marknadsföring i Sverige, as it sounds in Swedish, and I am responsible for the content in this course. So let's start to talk about strategy, vision, and branding for your organization or movement. This topic is one of the heaviest in theory, so I warn you, just in case, but at the same time it is also very important. But before we go to the heavy theory, I would like to start from one aspect, naming one aspect. In particular, how should we approach strategy? Should we plan or improvise? And also, how should we combine the non-profit aspect of our movement, at the same time need to survive and need to be professionals? I can say there are no easy answers to that, and there is no recipe that fits everyone. Instead, this is a dilemma, and this is a question that you should answer together as you go. This is though very different. This is though very important to keep in mind both aspects, that you are a non-profit, that you need some social commitment and engagement, but at the same time you need to think about the economic part and how you're going to survive, especially in the long term, if you have a purpose of this. The risk is always and it's common among non-profit organizations, is to think too much about the latter, particularly about the economic aspect and survival, and to shift focus from non-profit mission. You need to keep in mind the non-profit aspect at all times, that even if you have some form of revenue, even if you have extra budget and so on, profit, so to say, it is not the goal, it is the result of what you do. And also, so there are two ways to approach strategy, and it's the formation of let this strategy form, or formulate a strategy. Formulate a strategy means that you sit down, discuss together what your strategy should be in the upcoming time period, say a year, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. To let the strategy form means that, especially as a new founded movement or organization, first, so you have some milestones you would like to achieve, but then you first start working and see what actually works and what not. And then you analyze how it went since the time that you found it or you started thinking about it. And you decide your strategy for the future depending on how it went in the past. In this way, strategy is something that is formed gradually as the time goes and as your organization progresses in walking towards its mission or working towards its mission. This is contents for what we're gonna talk about today, and I'm not gonna focus on everything right now. Instead, we're gonna go different steps and different parts of it during this presentation. And not everything will be covered in this particular lesson. Instead, we are going to cover some aspect in the future, some aspect you need to look for further literature or knowledge if you would like to deepen into those topics. That's what we start with. Where do we start actually when talking about strategy? And we start with analyzing the current state. Depending on if you are new organization, if you haven't yet formed an organization, if you are just an informal group, you should answer the question so if you are already existing, then you should answer the question, what is our current mission and do we need to change it? What we think our mission should be. If you haven't yet created an organization, then you should decide what we want our organization mission or movement mission to be. And so all the key people involved in this process should discuss together and answer the questions. Okay, how we want to reach this, work towards this mission, how we want to achieve it, but also what we're not gonna do as a part of working towards this mission. What methods maybe we consider not ethical for us or not effective enough. For example, do we want to do some active sales? Do we want to have some open some shop to increase revenue to survive as an organization, or will it be considered not ethical for us? And instead we focus on donations and grants, so private and organizational funding. And then it's also very important that each and every one of you who are involved in the creation of this future mission or changing of the future mission of the organization or movement, you also answer the question, what do you personally want to achieve as a part of this organizational movement? This is going to connect organizational motivation with the personal one. And if the personal one is connected to it, then it's going to be easy, much easier than if a person has something to, it doesn't mean that it's salary, or again, we're talking about non-profit. It can be personal fulfillment. It can be exercising in something related to a profession or a hobby. But again, this is going to be a motivation which helps this person to move forward during joyful and challenging days as a part of this organization or movement. There is a tool which is very popular to analyze the current state of things, and it is called SWOT analysis. Most of you probably heard about it, maybe some of you not yet. And it analyzes the internal factors and external. Internal, which is strengths and weaknesses of your organization, and external factors, opportunities and threats that affect your organization. When it comes to external factors, which is opportunities and threats, you may see that I put several of them both as opportunities and threats. And it means that depending on what change is, it can be both an opportunity or a threat. When it comes to external factors, those that affect your organization is public environment, which means the general public, media, authorities, and so on. There is also competition and macro environment, which means demography, technology, economy, and so on. If there is economic crisis, probably there would be less people willing to donate. Again, it's not always true, but it can be. And so on. If there is economic growth, then it's going to be an opportunity for you. Well, I would like to mention, to talk a little bit more about the competition here, particularly that you as an organization, a movement, not only compete with, and not in the first hand compete with other organizations. Remember that the other organizations or movements that work towards similar goal can be your cooperation partners. But you also compete with other needs that your target groups have, like need for food, shelter, free time, rest, money to survive and pay the rent, and so on. and you also compete with other ways to satisfy those needs they have. If people want food, they can buy and cook something, or they can go to a restaurant and so on, or they can go to a place where food is offered for free. And then there are different service forms that serve particular need. So remember that you compete with other needs, ways to serve those needs, which is particularly important if you arrange some events. For example, keep in mind that, okay, if it is a long event, how people are going to satisfy their need for food? Will be there possibilities to eat during events? Do they need to bring food with them, or there will be a lunch? Will be there a restaurant where they need to pay, or will it be provided for free? If people have families and need, especially have small children, will people be able to bring children with them, and how their time will be organized while, for example, parents are busy with some workshop and so on. So these are the external factors that affect. What are the internal? The internal are the strengths that your organization have, that what it does well, and what it could be, and weaknesses, what the organization could do better, which is some limitations in structure, in strategy, maybe knowledge, skills, and so on. But when it comes to weaknesses, there are also some organizational constraints. Even despite it's a little bit connected to external, it's still considered to be internal weakness because it creates limitations inside in what organization can or cannot do. And this is different licenses and permits. Say if you work with social services, if your non-profit is working with social services, more probably you're gonna need some kind of permit to be able to do this. Maybe you need some permits to work with minors or with kids and with people with disabilities and so on. So it depends, and it can create some constraints for your organization too. After you talked about the current state of things, you need to analyze them. You need to define the core values of your organization or a movement. If you already exist as a organization, you can analyze what the present values are. Otherwise, you can decide those for the future. It is important also to notice here that you can do as much as possible to define those values, but mostly as you grow as an organization, a movement, you have more and more individuals involved, which have their own opinions, values, and so on. And the core values and the organizational culture is something that's gonna grow on its own, where you can try, but you cannot do that much about it. But you can at least set a course for it by discussing together what is important to you, what values guide your decision, and are those values inspiring, but also how we define, which is very important, how we define those values and implement them. For example, what means flexibility for us? Does it mean that a person can choose, when it comes to volunteering, that a person can choose when they come to us and engage in our activities that we offer, where we need volunteers? Do they choose? Are they able to choose weekend or weekday, evening or morning? Or does flexibility mean that we decide when they are to engage, and they should be willing to engage at any time of the day or week, whenever we say? And flexibility means this ability to stretch. Also, you will need some information to take decisions, to make decisions grounded and not just guess. It's always good to know instead of guessing. The information that you might need considers your target groups and their needs, but also wider audience. Not all people and organizations are your target group. Some are just audience, just wider audience, but also you need to know what is happening in the external environment and how it can affect you. What are the current trends? What are the potential competitors? And remember also from businesses, not only non-profits, but also other needs. And what are your potential collaborative partners and communication channels? What are current communication channels that are used by people of different age, different profession, and so on? What is the situation there? And it might be scary, but actually some of the ways to find this information may be low cost or even free. In particular, I would like to mention the secondary sources, volunteers, and ethnography. Secondary sources are those reports that other organizations publish. Maybe some non-profits, larger ones, already have resources to do some kind of research and they publish reports, for example, about volunteer engagement, about the current trends on private donations from individuals to non-profit causes, and so on. In this way, you can find the information that you need and use it. Also, volunteers, which means that you can ask people to help you to gather information, to do some online surveys or interviews for free. And also you can ask people of recommendations. For example, if you have a person, if you are building a non-profit organization or a movement around certain interests, a hobby, you maybe have someone with that hobby in your surrounding. You can interview them to get to understand their needs, and then you can ask to provide contacts of a person of similar interests so that you can interview them. And this is called snowball effect, snowball research. In this way, you can have build like a small network of people within this particular interest, a hobby or situation. Sometimes it's health issues and so on, and use personal networking of those people that you know for the sake of understanding your target group. And also ethnography, which is online observations. Ethnography is done very easy. For example, it can be done it is a professional research tool used by scientists, but you can also use it very easily. For example, those hashtags that are used in social media, they often are sort of keywords that people use who are interested in different things and questions. You can click on the hashtag usually and see other people who post something using these hashtags, and you can observe who those people are, what their interests are, and what their needs are. Of course, there is some risk for misinterpreting and having a bit maybe just limited knowledge of your target group, because it's only people who have open access to their accounts that you will be able to see. But still, it is better than nothing, and it is better than guessing. And so when you have some understanding of your target group's needs, and the current situation and values, then you can speak about mission, objectives, and goals for your organization or movement. Mission is answer to the question how we would like to change the world. And this is the overall purpose of the organization or a movement. What's important is that you focus not on what you're gonna do to provide this change, but instead what we want to see happen, how we would like the world to change if we succeed. Then you need also to talk about objectives and goals. Objectives is something general. is the overall direction of organization or movement, and it is the answer to the question, where are we going? You can focus on talking about impact, about reputation, and other variables. But the main point is that these are general terms. When it comes to goals, these are more specific terms, and you should try to make those goals as concrete as possible in terms of, you can say, SMART goals, in terms of that they are specific, they are time limited by goal by certain time, they are measurable as much as it is possible, they are realistic and relevant, and they are also achievable, that you can actually do work towards achieving this goal. So when you talked about those aspects, naturally you're gonna start talking in more inspiring terms and can create a vision. A vision is both an inspiring but also credible picture of the future, of this future success of the organizational movement, and it also affects the emotions, but it also presents a realistic way forward. So vision is the answer that you give to your audiences on the question, where are we going? And so again, this should be inspiring, but at the same time trustworthy. And if you want to, in order to formulate your vision, you can answer together those questions. Again, it's connected to the previous slide. What our success looks like. So how we would like the world, how we see that the world has changed if we succeeded, and what makes us unique also. So those answers to those questions help formulate your vision. What do you do with it then? Then you need to pick a strategy, core strategy for the time period. And again, you can use different strategies for different target groups or different segments or different time periods. And you can try what's working, what's not. Sometimes it's impossible to know for sure often it is impossible to know for sure until you try. What are the popular and main strategies for non-profit organizations? And they actually are also widely used in for-profit world too. These are differentiation, cost leadership, and focus. Cost leadership is easy. You offer something as cheap as possible or for free, for example, knowledge webinar and so on, among similar organizations. And then there are strategies, differentiation and focus. They are similar but different a bit. When it comes to differentiation, you try to offer something unique, and it can be both real or perceived uniqueness, and offer it to as wide group as possible, or as many segments as possible with this particular skill, expert knowledge, or something that you possess. Focus is when it's a bit vice versa. You focus on a narrow segment and try to serve it in as many ways as possible. Say differentiation is a strategy that we use, is about the non-profit marketing. We have this non-profit marketing knowledge and skills, and we try to spread this among as wide audience as possible, our organization. Focus is, for example, when organizations, some non-profits work with SLM seekers. And SLM seekers is a segment of target group. They can even focus on particular kind of SLM seekers, those who are looking for work. And they can offer different ways to approach. They can offer workshops in some professions or some courses in some professions like hairdressers and so on. They can offer workshops in networking. They can also arrange conferences or meeting places with potential employers and so on and so forth. So focus on one particular segment and to create as many offers as possible for it. It is possible to combine, and it's often combined differentiation with and focus, or cost leadership with focus. At the same time, it can be very risky to combine differentiation and cost leadership, and it's something that only large organizations or very innovative organizations that can afford this. Otherwise, when you try to serve large audience, large number of target groups, segments, and at the same time offer something for free or as cheap as possible, if you are a small organization, or unless you offer something very unique, very limited in supply, say in availability, then you risk to not be able to survive as an organization or a movement long term, because it will not be economically sustainable. So these are the strategies that you can choose, and based on those strategies you can target the audiences, the target groups, in several ways. You can see the ways to target are the names of the targeting are similar to the strategies. So you can offer undifferentiated marketing or targeting, differentiated, concentrated, or mass customization. Undifferentiated is when you have one offer for many target groups, or as all target groups. It is most popular among non-profit organizations, but at the same time is the least effective. If you have limited resources, you can instead use following two strategies, which is targeting strategies, which is differentiated and concentrated. Differentiated, connected to the strategies we just discussed. When you pick you do segmenting of target audiences, you pick several segments, and then you create specific offers for each segment. Say you pick 5 segments you work with, and then you create offer for each of them. And concentrated means that you focus on one particular segment and you try to create a very customized offer for them. This is particularly good if you have a limited budget. And this is connected to the strategy focus that we talked about just recently. Then there can also be targeting strategy, which is called mass customization. This basically you have individual offer for everyone. This is often the case when it comes to some kind of counseling. It's impossible to have universal offer for everyone. Instead, it's going to be case-based. But check if you have resources enough for it. So when you picked a strategy and how you're going to approach it, how you're going to target, then you can do a segmentation of your target groups if you need to split target groups into even narrower segments. Let's keep in mind that there are 3 categories of target groups that are equally important for non-profit organizations. Those are the beneficiaries, which means those whose lives or conditions you would like as an organization to improve or as a movement, but also your volunteers who are giving their time and energy to serve your mission, and also your donors, which can be both organizations, those who provide funding, but also those who are individual donors who provide membership fees or gifts or other kinds of donations, like one-time donations or monthly donations and so on. And members can be a part of any of those groups. These are the categories of target groups. And each category, or we can say each target group, can be split into further segments, which is called a process of segmentation. When it comes to segmentation, many organizations and movements are using general objective measures, which is age, gender, income, geography, profession, lifestyle, education, and so on. Sometimes it's more or less simple and intuitive. At the same time, you should be very careful with using this particular type of segmentation, because it can, especially as a non-profit movement organization, it can be very exclusive, which means create discrimination of those who doesn't fit norm. If you try to think that everyone in this age group are interested of these things, or are able to engage in the similar way into some question, then you are wrong. Not everyone has in this age or this living place have similar possibilities or abilities. That's why I encourage you to use behavior specific or psychological measures. And behavior specific are those who are, for example, those measures that use the occasion or degree of commitment or attitudes. Psychological measures, again, the personality or values, and also attitudes, decisive factors, the combination of behavior specific and psychological. Say the degree of commitment is a good behavior specific measure. It means how often a person is engaged into some question. Is it really very active? Is it does the person occasionally support this question, or is not engaged? Depending on which segment the person belongs, you can craft your offer accordingly. When you have done, if you need to do a segmentation and you need you create several segments, but also even if you don't, you need to define your position when it comes to the question in relation to this target group or segment, but also in relation to your competitors and similar organizations, and analyze it. And then when you see where you are at the moment, you can also think about where you would like to be. And then you can choose what positioning you would like to have based on some factors. What can be those factors that you can take into account? These are, so you can choose to build on your strengths, say on unique competences or expertise that you have. You can also find a niche, for example, some particular segment of a target group that you're very good at working with, or that you are naturally drawn to. And you can also reposition competitors. Say, especially this is actual when there are some prejudices. So you may try to position yourself by saying that the competitors as other actors are farther away from your target group than you are because of something. This is, for example, the positioning that we use, our organization uses to some extent. And when you define the position that you would like to have, relatively other organizations, similar organizations or movements towards your target group, then naturally you come up with solutions to what you can offer from this position. And we came to the term of value proposition. Value proposition is exactly what connects the strategy that we have discussed to communication. It is the value proposition that we can communicate to our target groups then. And value proposition, I can say honestly, it took me 2 decades to understand what it is. I hope it takes a shorter time for you. Value proposition is something that is unique according to your, and that gives your target groups the value according to them, according to the target groups. This is the answer to the question what should be communicated. and also to the question why target group should choose particularly your organization and movement instead of all others and all other needs that might compete with it. So it is the value proposition that you then communicate, which we're gonna talk in later lessons. And value proposition in itself is a part of branding, together with name and symbols and experience and contact points. So if we think about, okay, how do we work with branding of this organization or a movement? We work on three aspects, ideally at the same time. It is the value proposition, which is the concept of what we offer, the solutions, the awareness that we create, this change that we would like to create in the world, but also, say, the packaging of it, the name, brand name, the name of your organization, symbols, logo, colors, and so on. And also in IT, it's called user experience, but also experience how your target groups experience your organization and movements, where they come into contact with them. It can be meeting place, it can be online, like right now, and so on. So branding and work on branding is actually work with those three aspects. Now you could see how strategy and analyzing current situation, brainstorming where we would like to be, naturally follows by defining what our unique position is and can be, and what we can offer that our target groups value, and then it becomes a part of a brand of your organization or movement. That was everything that I would like to talk about during this lesson. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the further lessons.